КРАСАВЧИК, Honor, Shame, and How to Survive a Bilingual World. By Salvatore D. Montferrat. 1. Pugilism and Linguistics. A boxing gym, an ordinary evening. Two visitors come in to spar, both speaking Russian. One maybe 40, the other barely 20. The older man stands at the edge of the ring and watches. The kid starts cautiously, finds his rhythm by the second round, and at the end of the third slips a right hand and answers with two short left hooks, live ahead, one beat split in two. He steps off as the other man is visibly rocked. It is the kind of thing that looks easy only because it isn't. The older man doesn't clap. He says one word, КРАСАВЧИК. Translated literally, it means handsome guy. And that translation is worthless. He is not commenting on the young man's face. He is saying something for which English has no single word. That was beautiful. You did it right. You showed yourself. We saw it. The word does not praise the outcome alone. It confers something. It says that the young man, in that instant, became worthy of being seen. КРАСАВЧИК has no English equivalent. Neither does the Lakota Washoshe, which English flattens into brave, though the word points less to a mood than to a recognized kind of man, a brave warrior. Plains warrior standing was earned and witnessed. A young man became Washoshe much the way that kid in the ring became a КРАСАВЧИК, by doing the thing cleanly while others saw. I want to follow that word because it opens a door most of us walk past. Some words do not describe an action, they assign a standing, and the standing they assign belongs to a moral language that many readers of this essay no longer speak, a language they can recognize only by its accent and usually only by its worst speakers. 2. The air you breathe. A word about who most readers are, because the rest of this depends on it. If you are reading this, you almost certainly conduct your moral life in a particular grammar. You ask of an action. Was it right? Was it fair? Did it harm anyone? Was it honest? Did it violate someone's rights or your own conscience? This grammar is so deep in you that it does not feel like a grammar. It feels like morality itself, like the air, not one gas among others. But air is one gas among many, and so is this. There is another moral grammar, and it asks different questions. Did you carry yourself well? Did you show courage? Did you stand when standing cost something? Did you defend your people? Did you refuse to be humiliated? Were you, in front of witnesses, worthy of respect and of your place among others? Call the first the grammar of good and bad, the second the grammar of honor and dishonor. I did not invent the distinction. I arrived at it in a boxing ring and later found that anthropologists had mapped the same ground decades ago under other names, guilt cultures and shame cultures, Ruth Benedict on Japan, E.R. Dodds on the Greeks. That the same line keeps getting drawn by people who weren't looking for it is some evidence that it tracks something real. The crucial thing is that the honor grammar is not the absence of morality. It is not what you get before ethics arrives, or what is left after ethics decays. It is a full moral system with its own virtues, its own sins, its own heroes and cowards and traitors. It is simply organized around a different axis. And like any living language, it comes in dialects: Mediterranean, Japanese, Plains, prison yard. The dialects disagree about much, about whose chastity carries the family name and whose blood settles a debt. But what unites them is the axis, not the code. It is most useful to treat these two not as a pair of boxes you sort the world into, but as two languages, and languages do two things at once that are worth keeping separate. There is the synchronic fact. At any given moment they exist side by side, and you can learn to read one or the other, or both. And there is the diachronic fact. The languages have histories. They have been in contact for millennia. They borrow from each other constantly, and knowing which word came from where tells you something the present alone cannot. English took beef and mutton from its Norman conquerors and kept cow and sheep for the conquered Saxons who raised the animals. The class history of a country is fossilized in its dinner menu, and you notice only if you know the etymology. This essay tries to do both jobs. First, it gives you a glimpse of the second language. Then it traces what the two have borrowed from each other, including, in our own moment, a set of loanwords most of their speakers have no idea they are using. 3. Your mother tongue. Start with reading because before you can trace a borrowing, you have to be able to hear the source language at all. Here is the difficulty for the reader I described. Because you think so completely inside the good-bad grammar, the honor system will not show up to you as a system at all. It will show up as its failures. You will see the vendetta and not the loyalty that animates it, the swagger and not the courage it sometimes encodes, the refusal to apologize and not the thing being protected. You will see vulgarity, pettiness, thuggishness, the honor system rendered entirely in its pathologies, the way a language you don't speak sounds like noise, or worse, like grunting. The work of this first half is to make the second grammar recognizable as a grammar, not to sell it, but to translate it, and you can check the translation against the texts yourself. Neither language is ever spoken pure. Every actual person, every actual culture is some kind of bilingual. The good-bad world keeps an honor residue. We still speak of integrity, of a person's word, of dignity, of not selling out. And the honor world is shot through with judgments of right and wrong, fairness and betrayal. The question is never which grammar a person uses to the exclusion of the other. The question is, which one is native? Which one is the court of last resort? The one a person falls back on when the two collide and only one can win. When honor and goodness pull in opposite directions, when the right thing is the humiliating thing, or the courageous thing is the unjust thing, which way does a person break? That break tells you the mother tongue. 4. Lost in translation. Watch what happens to ordinary acts when you run them through the two grammars. They do not merely get judged differently. They become different acts the way the same sound is a different word in two languages. Take an apology. In the good-bad grammar, an apology is among the highest moral acts available. A confession, the acceptance of responsibility, the repair of a wrong. To apologize is to be mature, honest, decent. In the honor grammar, an apology can be all of that too, but it can also be a surrender, a baring of the throat, a public admission that the other party has the standing to extract submission from you. The same words carry two different moral meanings, or an insult. In the good-bad grammar, an insult is rude speech, unkind, possibly harmful, but still just speech, and the mature response is to let it go. In the honor grammar, an insult is not speech about you. It is an action done to you. It is an attempt to lower your standing in front of witnesses, and letting it go is not maturity, but acquiescence to the theft. This is the difference to keep because it is the one we will find, at the end, smuggled back into the mouths of people who would swear they had never spoken a word of honor in their lives. Retaliation, then. To good-bad it is escalation, the cycle of violence, two wrongs. To honor it is the restoration of a balance the insult disturbed, the necessary proof that your standing cannot be taken for free. Restraint splits most interestingly of all. In the good-bad grammar, restraint is simply good, the higher road, self-mastery. in the honor grammar restraint is admirable only if everyone knows it came from strength. The man who does not retaliate because he is above it is honored. The man who does not retaliate because he is afraid is the most dishonored of all. Same external act, doing nothing, and its entire moral value depends on a fact about what was available to you, which is not a question the good-bad grammar even thinks to ask. And informing. To one grammar, reporting a crime is civic duty, maybe courage, maybe something worth a whistleblower biopic. To the other, the informer is the lowest thing there is, the rat, the man who went outside the circle. This is the case where the honor grammar is the dangerous one, where its logic shields the guilty and punishes the person doing the obviously right thing. The translation runs both ways, and one direction protects predators. I am not asking you to admire the second language. I am asking you to be able to read it. The same act answers different questions depending on which question the culture treats as final. 5. The Iliad in the original. If you want to hear the honor grammar spoken without an accent before philosophy and scripture went to work on it, read the Iliad. A modern reader, raised entirely inside good-bad, tends to find Achilles intolerable. The best weapon is taken off the field because one proud man had a girl taken from him and decided to sulk in his tent while his friends died. He is vain. He is childish. He is monstrously self-absorbed. Thousands die so that one narcissist can nurse his ego. The reading is not stupid. It is, however, a translation error. Inside the world of the poem, what Agamemnon does is not rudeness, and not even mere injustice. The girl, Briseis, is Geras, a prize of honor, the visible public token of what Achilles is worth. By seizing her, Agamemnon is not merely stealing someone Achilles has come to care for. He is performing, in front of the whole army, a stripping of Achilles' standing. He is announcing that Achilles can be diminished and can do nothing about it. In a world where time, honor, the recognition owed to you, and kleos, glory, the only form of survival past death a warrior can have, are not ornaments but the very substance of a man's existence. This is no theft of property. It is an insult, and an insult is an attempt at annihilation. Notice what the 2 boxes reading misses. Achilles does not argue only from wounded pride. He argues that the distribution was unfair. The prize was allotted. There was a procedure. Agamemnon violated it. The other kings know it. Achilles has a justice case. He is not purely an honor creature any more than anyone is purely anything. Nobody speaks only one language. But when you ask which grammar is native for him, which one wins when they pull apart, the answer is unmistakable. Agamemnon later offers full restitution, the girl back, plus a fortune in gifts, plus his own daughter in marriage. The justice case is satisfied, and still, Achilles refuses to fight. The material wrong has been put right, and it is not enough, because the wound was never material. It was to his standing, and standing, once publicly taken, cannot be repaired by a private accounting. That refusal is the whole man. Honor is the court of last resort. Justice was only ever a lever he tried to use. Achilles is not outside morality. He is deep inside a morality in which honor is the existential currency, and a reader who finds him merely petty is not seeing more clearly than Homer. He is reading the poem in a language it was not written in. 6. Life unexamined. So much for reading. Now the histories, because the most interesting thing about these 2 languages is not that they exist side by side, but that they have been borrowing from each other for 3,000 years. And the West is the record of those borrowings. It begins in Athens. Homeric man asks one question above all. How do I stand among men? The eyes that matter are the eyes of others. the army, the city, the witnesses. Socrates moves the eyes inward. He asks instead what the condition of his soul is, and he says scandalously that it is better to suffer injustice than to commit it, that the man who is publicly humiliated but inwardly just is better off than the man who is publicly honored but corrupt. To the Homeric world, this is almost unintelligible. It relocates the whole drama of the moral life from the public square to a private interior, and it strips public reputation of its standing as the final judge. This is not a loan word. It is deeper than that, a change in the grammar itself, in where the language locates its highest authority. Plato builds it into a metaphysics, the soul its proper order, the good that stands above all the contingent honours men hand each other. This is why Plato's Republic banishes the poets. Homer was the school of the old grammar, and a new grammar must close the school. Aristotle, more conservative, tries to keep both worlds. He still prizes honour. His great-souled man cares very much about being worthy of esteem. But honour is no longer the raw recognition of the warband. It has been brought under the discipline of virtue. You should want honour, but only the right honour for the right things, in the right amount, and never as the final measure. Greek philosophy does not abolish honour. Instead, it begins to judge honour by a standard outside honour, and once you have done that, the public eye is no longer sovereign. 7. Blessed are the meek. The second loan is the most dramatic in the history of either language, because it is a word borrowed and then made to mean its own opposite, and we have repeated it so often we have stopped being able to hear how strange it is. The Hebrew Bible is not a book against honour. It is full of honour, shame, lineage, kingship, the vindication of the righteous before their enemies, the standing of a whole people before history and God. The covenant itself has an honour structure, but running alongside this and increasingly against it is something else. The prophet who condemns the powerful, the widow and the orphan and the stranger elevated as the true measure of a society, the insistence that God sees what the public eye does not. Two currents in one river. Christianity takes the second current and tries to make it the whole flood. It stakes its central claim on an image that, in the moral language of the ancient world, is simply obscene. Rome used crucifixion precisely because it was the maximum production of public dishonour. Naked, tortured, displayed, a human being reduced to a spectacle of total defeat, the exact opposite of everything May and Kleos meant. It was the death you gave to slaves and rebels specifically to demonstrate that they were nothing, and Christianity places that image at the dead centre of the cosmos and says, "Here is glory. Here is the victory. Here is the king." This is the borrowing that inverts. The honor world's word for absolute dishonor is taken up whole and made to mean absolute glory, the way a word can cross a border and come out the far side meaning its own reverse. The last shall be first. The meek inherit the earth. Blessed are the poor, the mourning, the persecuted. The qualities the honor world most despises: humility, meekness, the turned cheek, the refusal to retaliate, the open admission of one's own sin are named as the highest virtues, and the qualities it most prizes are eyed with suspicion as pride. Christianity does not merely preach being good. It reorders what counts as great. Nietzsche, of course, saw the same inversion and spent a career prosecuting it as the slave revolt in morality, the revenge of the weak on the strong. The observation I am borrowing, the verdict I am leaving to him. 8. Hiding in plain sight. So the West is built from three things that do not fully agree: the Homeric honor world, the Greek relocation of morality to reason and the soul, and the Judeo-Christian inversion that crowns the humble and dignifies the weak. Out of this long contact between languages comes the thing we now simply call morality. Conscience, rights, human dignity, equality before the law, the priority of intention, the suspicion of pride, the high value placed on apology and restraint, and the inward life. We became, most of us, native speakers of good and bad. But the older language was never killed. It was domesticated. It was moralized, renamed, pushed underground, put under the judgment of the newer grammars, and there it lives, in every corner of modern life where reputation under pressure still decides things. It lives in combat sports. It lives in prisons and gangs, where it turns lethal and reputation becomes survival. It lives in the military, with its loyalty and its refusal to leave a man behind. It lives in immigrant and clan communities organized around the family name and the unbearable weight of shame. And it lives in every online space, which is a vast machine for the public adjudication of status dressed up as discourse. 9. Sticks and stones. And now the borrowing has begun to run the other way. The loanwords have been so thoroughly naturalized that their speakers believe them native. Recall the difference I asked you to keep. To the good-bad grammar, an insult is just speech. To the honor grammar, it is an act done to you, an injury to standing that cannot simply be let go. For most of the modern period, the good-bad world prided itself on the first view. "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," was the most anti-honor sentence ever taught to children. The whole liberal settlement in 13 words. Words are not deeds. The answer to speech is more speech. No one is wounded by being called a name. That settlement is dissolving, and it is dissolving because the good-bad world has quietly reimported the honor premise it spent a century expelling. It now holds across a startling range of its territory that certain speech is an injury to standing, that to be named wrongly, depicted wrongly, addressed wrongly, is not merely offensive but harmful, a wound that must not be borne in silence. That is the honor premise verbatim. But the good-bad world cannot run the honor remedy. It has no place for the duel, the retaliation, the wronged man restoring his own standing by his own hand. That machinery is gone, at least for now. So it metabolizes the borrowed premise into its own grammar. The injury to standing is recoded as harm. Harm is a violation, and the violation is referred not to the avenger, but to the administrator, the tribunal, the code of conduct, the platform, the statute. Honor's wound, treated by good-bad's machinery. Sociologists have lately watched this hybrid at work and pronounced it a new moral culture, a culture of victimhood. The loanword story is simpler, and, by Occam's lights, better. Not a third language, just an old one borrowing from an older. Watch how far the loanword has travelled, and in how many directions at once, because the spread is what proves it belongs to no one tribe. On the progressive left, misgendering and dead-naming are cast not as discourtesies, but as injuries. The wrong name or pronoun before others a wound to who you are, and recognition, the exact word, is owed, its denial a kind of violence. This is the КРАСАВЧИК structure exactly. The right word confers standing, the wrong word strips it. On the populist right, the desecrated flag, the soldier's memory insulted, the war on the word Christmas, are speech as injury to a sacred standing, demanding vindication. From the state, in its milder forms, there is Russia's law against insulting religious feelings, with the Orthodox Church in the protected slot. And running across the whole map is the importation of Islamophobia as something very close to a blasphemy concept, a charge that scrambles the left-right sorting completely, since here the secular left finds itself defending a prohibition on depicting a prophet, which is to say, running a blasphemy code in the vocabulary of harm. A necessary caution, so the pattern does not prove too much. Not all of this is the honor premise sincerely metabolized. Some of it is simply power-reaching for whatever moral language is locally available to silence what it wants silenced. Russia's statute is at least as much an instrument as a conviction, a convenient handle for jailing inconvenient people. The interesting cases are the sincere ones, and the purest of those is the trans one. There is no statute behind it and no autocrat, only a genuinely good, bad population, the most rights-fluent and harm-literate cohort that has ever lived, reaching by its own conviction for the ancient premise that a word can wound standing. And it cannot see that this is what it has done, because it has translated the premise so completely into its own tongue of harm, safety, dignity, violence, that the honor origin is invisible to it. Tell such a speaker they are running honor logic, and they will hear it as an insult, which is the tell. And here is why the obvious rival explanation fails. Someone will say this is not honor returning at all, merely the harm category expanding, an internal development of liberalism with no borrowing required. But a system does not expand a category by importing the one premise the category was built to exclude. The liberal settlement was founded on a specific axiom, that speech is not violence, and that the answer to speech is more speech, an axiom written into the First Amendment and into the free speech guarantees of most of the Western world. The harm as injury to standing premise does not stretch that axiom, it reverses it. And a reversal is not growth from within, it needs a source from outside. Concept creep can describe liberalism getting bigger. It cannot describe liberalism contradicting its own foundation. The honor grammar can because the reversed premise is its native premise. The diagnosis applies to the protected core, not the old edges. Defamation, fraud, incitement, true threats were always carve-outs and nothing turns on them. The tell is the reversal reaching the core the settlement existed to protect: the opinion, the mockery, the blasphemy, the objectionable book, the offensive talk. There is a more learned version of the same objection, and it deserves an answer. Recognition has a pedigree inside philosophy itself, the story runs. Hegel made it the engine of self-consciousness, and a long line of theorists carried it down to the politics of identity. No honor culture required. But look where Hegel's recognition is born, in a struggle to the death between two men, each staking his life to prove he is more than a thing. That is the honor wager itself, standing proven by what a man will risk for it, carried into philosophy and kept on the books. And the modern theorists concede the ancestry on their first pages, and then promptly forget about it, all the while building the politics of recognition on the foundation of the old regimes of honor. Then there are the cases where the imported premise was answered not in the borrowed remedy, but in the original one. Set three of them in chronological order, because the story they tell together is not the story any one of them tells alone. Begin with Salman Rushdie. When the Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa against him in 1989 for writing the Satanic Verses, the Western response was almost ostentatiously unanimous. No serious voice suggested he had earned it. The answer to a novel one disliked was a counter-novel, or a counter-essay, or silence, but not a contract on the author's life. That a regime would call for a writer's death over a book was felt, across the Western political spectrum, as a barbarism, and barbarism was the right word in the good-bad grammar, because the offence was not that the response was disproportionate, but that it treated speech as an act answerable in blood. The settlement was clean and confident. Words are not deeds, and the man who confuses the two has stepped outside civilization. 26 years on, in January 2015, two gunmen walked into the offices of a French satirical magazine that had published cartoons of the Prophet and killed 12 people. The 1989 settlement was still nominally in place, and Je suis Charlie was the slogan of the week, but listen to what was already being said underneath it. The honor remedy was on full display in its original undomesticated form, the wrong to sacred standing answered by the wronged party's own hand, with a weapon, before witnesses. The metabolized remedy was audible too, and from respectable quarters. The cartoon was harm, the magazine had provoked, the wound was named Islamophobia, the speech was to be restrained. And the older liberal remedy was there as well, though already weakening. It was just speech, and the price of free speech is precisely the offence it gives. Two grammars produced three responses: retaliation, administration, and refusal, and the three met over a single corpse-strewn room, openly at war over how the injury should be answered, or whether the word injury was the right one at all. Move forward another 7 years. When a young American walked up to Rushdie on a stage in upstate New York in 2022 and stabbed him a dozen times, the response was again broadly old frame. He had said what he had said. No one of significance suggested the world would have been better without him. But the old frame held for Rushdie by then, less because it was still the live settlement than because Rushdie himself had been canonized inside it. To recategorize him in 2022, to suggest he had provoked, that the book had been a kind of harm, that he bore some authorship of his own bleeding, would have been too embarrassing against the public record of 1989. The borrowing had nonetheless begun to reach for him. There were academic voices, low but audible, drawing exactly that recategorization. They did not become the dominant frame because the public memory of 1989 was too recent to overrule openly. But they were there. He survived rhetorically because he was a fossil preserved in earlier rock, and the rock around him had begun to crack. History, when it rhymes, sometimes rhymes on a first name. A decade after the Paris killings, on American ground, with no prophet and no foreign hand, a man named Charlie was again shot for speech. The coincidence is only a coincidence. The architecture of what followed is not. Charlie Kirk gave talks. Many people, this writer included at times, found them objectionable. He held no office and had committed no crime. The indictment against him, such as it was speech. He was shot dead for it. And the three responses sorted themselves at once, on the same template Paris had sorted into 10 years earlier, but with the weights shifted. The honor remedy in its raw form was again present. The wrong of unbearable speech, answered by the wronged party's own hand. But the metabolized remedy was no longer underneath. It was out in the open, contesting the frame. What had been the marginal academic murmur around Rushdie in 2022, and the respectable undertone after Hebdo, was within hours a prominent frame in mainstream commentary. His speech was violence, his audiences endangered. The dead man again made at least partly the author of his own death, this time without the apology Paris still felt obliged to offer. Matthew Dowd, hours after the shooting and before Kirk's death had even been confirmed, told an MSNBC audience that hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions, and that you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have, and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place. That was the borrowed premise stated in its native vocabulary, speech as cause. the dead man as partial author of his own end. Dowd apologized within the day and was fired anyway. The retraction is itself evidence not that the borrowing isn't real, but that it isn't yet fully naturalized. Apologies of that kind run on the speaker's recognition that the sentence has come out wrong by the lights of his own grammar. And the older liberal remedy, the one Rushdie in 1989 had been the high watermark of, was by now nearly a museum piece. He said things, that is all. And saying things does not earn a bullet, a position one could still hold but increasingly had to defend, where in 1989 it had not needed defending at all. One man, no religion, no foreign actor, no special category of provocation. The same three voices in the same arrangement, on ground that had told itself the pattern was somebody else's problem. A decade from Charlie Hebdo to Charlie Kirk, the same architecture, the weights redistributed across the floor. I am describing, not adjudicating. Whether any of these injuries is real, whether any of these responses is just, is a different essay and a harder one. The point here is structural, and it holds regardless of where you come down on the merits. A premise the good-bad world believed it had expelled has come back in through the one door that world keeps open, the door marked harm, and it has come back from the left and the right, and the mob and the state all at once. That is what a living language does. It borrows when it needs a word, and it forgets where the word came from. 10. Bilingual Leviathan. The state does not remain indifferent to the return of the honour grammar, where the older liberal premise that speech is not an act, that the answer to a book is another book, collides with a population fluent in honour's original response. The state will, when pressed, give up the liberal premise to keep the monopoly. Britain's policing of religious and communal insult, online and off, is the clearest contemporary instance. The sovereign extends harm procedure into speech precisely where private retaliation is a live possibility. On the old Hobbesian theory that the alternative to public administration of grievance is private administration of it, and the private kind comes with bodies. The pattern lately produced a specimen too clean to invent. England abolished its blasphemy law in 2008. In February 2025, a Turkish émigré burned a Quran outside the Turkish consulate in London and was attacked on the spot by a man with a knife. The attacker received a suspended sentence. The burner received a conviction, religiously aggravated public order, harassment, alarm, distress, the harm vocabulary, doing the work the abolished offence no longer could, and it took an appellate judge to overturn it, with a reminder no English court had needed to issue for 17 years, that there is no offence of blasphemy in English law. The avenger had appeared in person, knife in hand, and the sovereign's first instinct was to charge the speaker. The state is not borrowing the honour premise. It is conceding it, agreeing to speak the honour language in order to remain the only avenger. Leviathan will use any grammar available to keep its authority intact. It spent centuries monopolizing vengeance and calling it law precisely to take the sword out of the wronged man's hand. Conceding a principle of good-bad is not a high price for keeping it there. 11. The grid and the diagonal. The framework has so far been used to read the past and the dead, Achilles, the cross, a fatwa, a magazine. Turn it now on the present and the quick. A figure both grammars claim at once and see whether it can do more than describe, whether it can settle a case the reader thinks he has already settled. The 4 cells about to be drawn are a standing structure, and every generation seats somebody in them. The reader of 2040 can supply his own occupant. Ours is Donald Trump. The usual story about him is that one half of the country loves him and the other half hates him. That story is true as far as it goes, which is not far, and the standard repair for its shallowness is shallower still, that his supporters speak honor and his critics speak good and bad, that the line between the camps is the line between the two languages. That is the tidy version, and it is mostly false. Both grammars run straight through the middle of him. Each finds in the same man both a hero and a disgrace. The division that matters is not between the camps, it is inside each of them, and missing that is precisely how the tidy version flatters everyone into believing the other tribe is the one speaking the wrong tongue. Begin with good and bad, where the fight is at least the fight everyone takes it to be. The critic indicts dishonest, cruel, lawless, a danger to the institutions. The defender answers in the very same grammar. The policies were sound, the judges good, and the deeper harm runs the other way, from the institutions to the people they were built to serve and have lately failed. That argument can, in principle, be had, because both sides are asking the good-bad question and disagreeing only about the answer. The grammar is shared. The verdict is not. Now run him through honor and the same thing happens. The language splits, and the same conduct is read by its own native speakers as glory and as disgrace. Honor has its case for him, and it is a real one. The man who refuses to be humiliated, who returns every blow, who will not bare his throat to people he regards as enemies, who takes the contempt of the credentialed as proof that he stands where they cannot make him kneel. But honor also has its case against him, and it is this essay's own case, made in the admirer's own tongue. The whole argument stands in a boxing ring where the word means everything because the older man says it of the younger. Honor is conferred by witnesses and cannot be claimed by the self. The man who confers the word on himself is, in the honor world, the standard sign of one who has not earned it. Boasting is not an honor virtue. It is honor's absence, advertised. Honor is, beyond that, positional, and the man who announces his own primacy violates the grammar at the root, since one does not arrive at the summit by announcing one is there. And there is a deeper charge on the same scale. To betray the circle, to break faith with one's own people, is the sin the honor world punishes above cowardice itself, and a man can do that in 1,000 ordinary ways that have nothing to do with courage. The grammar that crowns him has, in the same vocabulary, the means to condemn him. So the antiphon does not run the way the tidy story wants. It runs 4 ways, and the second voice in each grammar is the one almost nobody says aloud. Good-bad against, he is dishonest and cruel. Good-bad for, he says what the honest are punished for saying. Honor for, he cannot be shamed by our enemies. Honor against, he breaks the code, or worse, he has no code. You will not resolve this with more facts because the disagreement is not only about facts, it is about which kind of fact counts as moral evidence. But notice what the 4-celled reading buys that the diagonal cannot. The diagonal flatters. It tells each camp that the other is the one speaking the wrong language. The grid is even-handed in its discomfort. It shows the honor speaker that his own code can condemn the man he reveres, and it shows the good-bad speaker that his fluency in rights and harm has left him deaf to a case against his opponent sharper than the one he keeps making. The failure of translation that does the daily damage is not only between the two tongues, it is the refusal, inside each camp, to hear the second voice in its own mouth. 12. Rules of engagement. In the end, you can do one thing, which is the whole of what this essay has to offer by way of survival in a bilingual world. You can remember, before you speak and before you take offense, that a statement in one grammar is an action in another. The apology that repairs in your language may be a surrender in his. The restraint you read as cowardice may be his highest discipline. The joke that is only a joke to you may already, to him, be a blow that has landed and must be answered. Knowing this does not tell you whether to speak or to hold your tongue. That is yours to choose, as it should be. It tells you only that the choice is real, that there is a choice where you thought there was none, and that the man who does not know he is making it is the one most surprised by what comes back at him. Let us end where we began, in the ring. The young man slips the punch and lands a clean counter, and the older man at the edge says it. КРАСАВЧИК. Only now the word should sound different to you.